What is up, guys? Teddy Cornwell. Welcome to the Underdog Talk, the world's most underrated podcast. And there is something about the Underdog. But today, we are joined by the one and only Natasha Daniels. And I just have to give this lovely lady a proper Underdog Talk introduction. You see her, a child anxiety and OCD therapist, as well as a mom to three kids. She is the author of How to Parent Your Anxious Toddler, which my mom actually does love. Anxiety Sucks, which it does. A Teen Survival Guide and Social Skills Activities for Kids. She's also the creator of ATParentingsurvival.com, the host of the AT Parenting Survival podcast. Check that out as well, and the creator of the YouTube series Ask the Child Therapist. What can you not do, ma'am? But the one and only Natasha Daniels. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for taking your time to come on. And I have to ask, why decide to, be a therapist and then, specifically a child therapist, and then specifically even more center around OCD?
A lot of it was by accident, really. I grew up with, a father who was bipolar with psychosis. And so there was a lot of mental health issues in my family. And just going to a lot of psych hospitals and being in and out of that as a kid, witnessing that. So I wanted to help adults. And then in graduate school, they kept accidentally putting me in kid internships. And I was like, I love kids. So it switched to kids. And then when I had my practice, I really enjoyed working with the kids who had anxiety and OCD the most, because I felt like it was skill-based. I could really help them. They can make huge progress. And so I just started to narrow down my niche. And then the universe has a sense of humor. And then I birthed three kids after that wound up having anxiety and OCD. So it came first. That's kind of the weird thing.
It's almost like everything weirdly happens for a reason, like you said, Natasha. I don't understand it, and I don't think anyone here does. But obviously, what ages do you treat up to? I've always wondered what the age for a child psychiatrist is up to.
Well, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a
All right.
therapist, but sometimes those are different.
I know.
But
I always say that. Therapists are.
I would say all the way up to 18.
Oh, wow.
Young adult, even as far as my online resources.
Wow. Yeah, I always wondered what the kind of barrier or age was up to, but yeah, I guess young adult, child, yeah. So, obviously, I think I know what the definition of OCD is, but oftentimes, people think it's kind of that cleaning disease to a point, or kind of repetitive thoughts of nature. But what is your definition of OCD, Natasha, as obviously a professional and someone who is very knowledgeable on this topic?
Yeah, unfortunately, OCD is so misunderstood. And the stereotype really perpetuates kids and teens and young adults not getting help. It perpetuates the suicide rate. And so a lot of times we think it's obsessive cleaning disorder, or to be neurotic, to be to wash our hands repetitively. And really, OCD is just having an intrusive thought or feeling that's causing distress and the need to do or avoid something to get that brief relief. And the more you do or avoid, the more your OCD grows, and it's this vicious loop. And it can be any theme. It can be feeling like you're going to turn into a bad person, or that you've done something bad, but you don't know what it is, or that you might harm somebody, or that things are not even. There are so many just weird disguises of OCD that aren't really known in the public.
Yeah, and one thing, I was looking at your work, and you talk about something called real memory OCD and false memory OCD. Is this considered a subtype of OCD, or is this just another wicked part of OCD?
OCD is OCD, but because it has so many different themes and disguises in how it manifests, that we do give shorthand names for things false event OCD, or symmetry OCD, or contamination OCD, or moral OCD. Like we give these little shorthands, but it is all OCD. The foundation of how you treat it is the same. How it shows up is kind of the same. That you're getting that intrusive thought and that need to do something. And so there are kind of like themes that tend to happen with a lot of people. And so this shorthand of, oh, it's moral or it's a real event OCD is helpful for people to feel validated and feel like, oh, okay, like other people have that intrusive thought. And so it does help on that end.
Yeah, to put a meaning to what they're going through, I think is important. Now, would you mind talking about what real memory OCD is and what false memory OCD is? Because I feel like, again, as we mentioned, people think it's just kind of this cleaning disorder, but it's so much more complex and intricate than just and the people with the cleaning disorder, I know for a fact it's not just okay, I'm going to clean this plate and I might clean a little extra. No, the people who actually have it are, it's a has to be 100% spotless. But back to my thing, what is the difference between obviously real event OCD and false memory OCD?
I don't think you want to get too caught up in the details of the titles of things. I think there are some people get intrusive thoughts that they may have done something that they didn't do. And so there is this, they're getting hooked into this obsession of, did I do this and I don't remember? And so I have to check my memories, or I have to check my steps, or I have to ask other people for validation. And so intellectually, they know they didn't do something, but what if they did? Or what if they don't remember? And so they need to go back. It's not a psychosis. It's more of, it's a doubting disease. And so it just makes you doubt, well, I can't be 100% sure that that didn't happen. And so that can become an issue.
I like to put it, no definition. It's OCD. The subtypes are kind of just there to give that definition, but OCD is OCD. Now, how is OCD diagnosed? Are there specific tests or assessments used, Natasha?
Yeah. And it's different for each clinician. There's, for me with kids, it's the SciBox is the most common assessment tool, which is just a questionnaire, really just trying to figure out how intense the struggle is and what themes they might have. And so it's definitely important to see an OCD therapist, someone who is trained in how to treat OCD versus someone who dabbles in everything. Because I think a lot of general clinicians think, bring me ADHD, bring me depression, bring me OCD. I got it, and OCD is a different beast. It's counterintuitive. How you assess it is, there are certain measurements, and how you treat it is completely different than those issues as well.
Now, obviously, you also specialize in anxiety. Can someone have OCD and also have anxiety and even other, things like depression and ADHD? Is that also possible?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, it's likely. I mean, there's a lot of comorbid conditions. And so a lot of people with OCD have anxiety. People think that OCD is a form of anxiety, and it's not anymore. It's not even classified in the DSM as an anxiety disorder. It has its own category, but they are comorbid conditions, just like OCD and ADHD or OCD and depression. You can have other disorders and other mental health struggles along with OCD.
All right. Wow. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, obviously, you specialize in children and young adults, but obviously you also kind of help the parents who deal with this, these situations. So how can, friends and family members support someone with, OCD? Is oftentimes from my experience, the person will kind of ask repetitive questions and looking for that reassurance, which it's almost like they can never get. And I've seen it where the parent gets constantly tired of the same question over and over, and it kind of almost diminishes the sufferers. It almost negatively affects them. How would a parent go about doing that in a way that would make the sufferer feel better?
Yeah, I always say OCD is a family affair because it does not live in a box with the person that's struggling. It hooks those people that are around that person in. And for parents to learn how OCD shows up and how, when they're talking to OCD and not their child, and even have your child learn what is OCD and when am I doing a compulsion versus actually talking to my parent? And I'll give you an example. So like all three of my kids struggle with anxiety and OCD because that's just how it goes around here. And my son has some moral OCD themes, and I didn't even catch it because he has bigger themes that are not moral related. But he was saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," and thank you, thank you. He was saying thank you for a lot of things. And I was like, he's like saying thank you when I take him to the doctor. I'm like, something is up with that. And eventually, he said, "Mom, when I say I'm sorry, it's a compulsion, and I want you to say it's okay." And so that's because I educated him enough on how OCD works in general and the different themes that when it was popping up and I wasn't even spotting it because it wasn't one of his core themes, he was able to identify it. And so then I was able to say to him, how do you think what is a good way for me to respond to? We actually personify OCD, so we call it squishy. We all have different names for different stuff. So how do you want me to respond to squishy when he's trying to get fed? We talk about it getting fed. Like OCD wants to get fed, it wants to grow. And he said, well, if I say I'm sorry, why don't you just tell me sorry, not accepted? That'll drive my OCD crazy. So we agreed on that. That didn't happen overnight. There was a lot of work behind the scenes to like foster that relationship. But now he says, I'm sorry. And I'll be like, yeah, your sorry is not accepted. And we'll do it sarcastically. And then he'll kind of go, oh, and he's like, okay, okay, okay. And then I'm not feeding it. So that communication, then it's not impacting our relationship in a negative way.
So basically letting him accept the OCD slowly and kind of battle it to a point with obviously stopping the reassurance and not stopping it, but making it silly and in a fun way to kind of put that OCD in its place. I think that's so key. And for anyone watching, I mean, I would definitely give that a try if obviously your child is constantly asking you questions. I think that method, is awesome. Now, can OCD symptoms change over time or vary in severity?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the hard part is that a lot of times we call it like whack-a-mole. It's like it changes its theme often. And then as your child develops, and they learn, there's a sexual information coming or developmentally now they're in relationships as they get older, OCD will glom onto anything, anything that it can glom onto. And so it often changes and morphs over time. And it can get better for a while and then it can pop up again. There could be stressors in your life that make it pop up again. Even if you have all the skills and you've worked on it, and you just have to apply those skills and bring it back down, or hormone shifts, lots of different things that can increase OCD symptoms again.
Now, and obviously, when you look up OCD, it's almost like sometimes the sufferer knows that they have it, but it just feels so real. And as you talked about, Natasha, that what if, how does someone battle that what if in a healthy manner? I mean, are there strategies to beating that what if and dealing with that uncertainty of the OCD?
Yeah, a lot of it is recognizing that none of us have control,
Mm.
and that OCD gives you a falsity of control, that if you can just do this or that, then you have some control over whatever the theme is at that time. And we don't have control. We have control over pretty much nothing, which none of us want to really sit with that because that's uncomfortable. And so when we accept that, we will not know 100%. Am I a killer? Well, not today. I don't feel like I'll be a killer. The likelihood is small, but I can't 100% guarantee that. Not today. Will I or will not? Will I or will I not get sick? Or will I or will not throw up? Will I turn into a bad person? I may or may not. And so it's kind of embracing doubt and embracing uncertainty and not getting hooked into like needing to know 100%, which is hard.
It is hard. And I can imagine that someone who's going through this it's very difficult. And I think the one thing is it takes time. Like you mentioned, obviously, with your son, it wasn't a overnight thing. And I think for anyone who does have OCD to just keep on fighting and, understand that this is not a thing that you snap your fingers, you click your heels, and it's gone with. There are tools in the toolbox, and one thing is to just keep on working on it and accepting the uncertainty. Now, obviously, we hear about CBT and even this thing I was reading about exposure therapy. How crucial is that in OCD for helping someone kind of not beat OCD but manage their symptoms?
ERP, exposure response prevention, is a type of CBT, and it's very helpful um, because it's helpful to one, learn how to not give into the compulsion. I kind of call it like offense and defense. So defense is like OCD is knocking and it wants me to do stuff. It wants me to maybe mentally do compulsions where I'm like mentally debating with myself, or I'm mentally checking, or mentally saying things, or physical compulsions, let me wash or tap, or ask for reassurance. And so defense is like, can I delay that? Starting with baby steps. Can I delay that? Can I, resist asking my parent that question? Or can I resist washing? Or can I resist reorganizing that? Or whatever it might be. And offense is poking back at the beast when the beast is sleeping. That's kind of how I look at it. And so it's like going to the OCD gym. Like, the core of it is I can't handle this discomfort of maybe not knowing, or just feeling disgust, or whatever the core fear is. And so I need to practice that. And when OCD is bombarding you with intrusive thoughts, you're not practicing, you're reacting. Your defense, you're reacting. But when you do ERP in systematic slow steps, you are basically purposely triggering yourself instead of OCD triggering you. And then you're learning how to sit with that discomfort without scratching the itch. So I'm not going to, go do the compulsion, and I'm going to sit there and handle the discomfort. And so you're building your OCD muscle so that when the intrusive thought comes, you're like, yeah, I've been practicing this all day. Like, it's not bothering me as much.
And I do have a question. You mentioned the offense and defense, and I want to kind of add another thing, a game to it all. And a game ends. So can OCD ever end? Is this something that stops? I saw a study that shows it can stop, or is this completely false? Can OCD ever vanish to a point,
Well, I
or does it
think,
get better?
yeah, feel like OCD therapists are cautious about saying you can cure it or you
Right.
can crush it and it will disappear. I talk about crushing OCD or crushing anxiety, but it really is like crushing it and making it manageable and small. Um, I look at it more like asthma or diabetes. You can really manage your diabetes and not have any issues with diabetes. And maybe periodically you have to adjust your medication, or you have to adjust your diet or your lifestyle, but then it's managed again, ideally. And I feel like anxiety and OCD, especially OCD, is the same. It's considered a chronic condition, but I have worked with a lot of people where they learn the skills and then they're just weeding. A little weed pops up that's OCD, and they're like, nope, 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 that's not going to happen. Another weed pops up, and they're like, because they're not like, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to address it. They're like actively, proactively looking for new themes, and that's why I train kids to do this independently. Eventually, I train parents to train their kids to independently be able to spot new themes and pull out those weeds and do exposures when they start to pop up, so that they can live a life where it's a little mosquito that's just like bothering them periodically.
I love that. I love the analogies, and obviously, it's almost like you work with kids on a day-to-day basis, which obviously you do. Now, I do have a final question, and what is your biggest tip for someone who is looking to kind of battle that anxiety? And then to add on to that, how does someone go about getting a therapist? Is this something that you get a recommendation for? Is this something that, there's online resources, obviously, like yourself? How would one go about, that? And then what is your biggest tip for someone who's struggling with anxiety right now, Natasha?
Um, well, if it's OCD, you're going to find a different type of therapist.
Okay.
And so since we've been talking about OCD, I would say, find an OCD therapist, and you can look for one at the International OCD Foundation. They have their own directory, and that's at iocdf.org/find-help, or NoCD, which does virtual OCD therapy. So treatmyocd.com is another really great one that's global. Because if you find an anxiety therapist who is not well skilled and trained in OCD, they'll do talk therapy. And they will problem solve, and they will reframe your thinking, which is all can facilitate a mental compulsion, mental debating, mental reframing. And so anxiety therapists are not too hard to find. Those are easy. Someone who, I'm biased to cognitive behavioral therapy, I think CBT is a great approach. But if you find another approach for anxiety, it's not going to be a barrier to success. You can try all sorts of different therapies, and lots of them can work. But if you find the wrong therapy for OCD, it can actually increase your OCD symptoms. So that becomes dicey.
That is dicey. So obviously, those resources are going to be crucial. Then I never realized that OCD therapists were on their own to a point, obviously, and until you mentioned that. And I think that is key because I think it can be really confusing to certain people if they get a therapist who's kind of just for general anxiety and not aware of some themes of OCD. Now, Natasha, thank you so much for taking your time to come on the podcast. But before we go, the floor is yours. Where can we find, your awesome podcast, and where can we find all your work, and what's that social media handle, man?
It's AT Parenting Survival. So you can find me at AT Parenting Survival on Instagram. It's AT Parenting Survival Podcast, and it's atparentingsurvival.com. So it's pretty easy.
And are these courses that parents can sign up for?
Yeah, I actually closed my practice, and now I just provide global resources online. And so I created courses for parents because there's people all over the world that can't access evidence-based approaches to anxiety and OCD. And then I do have a community, an AT parenting community, like membership community for parents. And we do live Zoom calls, and we do support group calls for kids and teens and parents, and try to give people, fill in that gap of the barriers to treatment.
I love it. And first person, first parent to, sign up for one of those courses, send me a screenshot of you getting in there, and I'll send you a very special gift from the Underdog Talk podcast. I mean, I think it is so crucial to know how to help, your children with anxiety, OCD, and really be there for them when they might need it the most. So, Natasha, again, thank you so much for taking your time to come on the podcast and really explain OCD and just really dive deep into it, because I think it is and I did read that it's almost like 1 in 50, if you're at a baseball game, 1 in 50 people have OCD. So it's a very, common, is it a disorder, or what is it actually?
It's a disorder.
Disorder. Okay. So it is a very common disorder. Thank you. I didn't want to say something that I didn't know. So it's a disorder. Perfect. And guys, again, check out Natasha's work on Instagram. All her links will be in the bio. Again, Natasha, thank you for your time. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Until next time, guys, Underdog out.